Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Alison. I write as Alison May, 50% of Juliet Bell, and most recently I write romantic comedies as Sinclair. Here on YouTube every Friday I talk about writing, novels and all things publishing industry related. So if you're interested in that sort of content, if you're a new author, if you're an author who feels like they've lost their way, if you're a perfectly decent and experienced author and you just feel like publishing is crazy sometimes, then I talk about all of those sorts of things here on YouTube. Please do subscribe to the channel. It makes a massive difference to YouTube creators if people subscribe. It allows us to keep making content and making it freely available. So please do subscribe to the channel. This week would normally be a book review week. At the end of the month, start of the month, those things tend to butt up to each other. I usually do a book review video, and we are going to do some book reviews this week, but they're going to be at the end of the video because first I want to talk about something else, and it's the thing that everyone in publishing in the UK seems to be talking about at the moment, which is that a couple of weeks ago there was a survey out that basically said that debut authors, so newly contracted authors in their kind of first year of being contracted or published, were really finding the publishing industry difficult from a mental health, from a mental well-being perspective. Their experience wasn't what they'd been led to expect. The communication from publishers wasn't always very good. Authors were feeling very out on a limb, unsupported, undirected in terms of what they were supposed to be doing, and what the publication experience was going to be like. And this has caused a lot of talk right across the industry between authors, amongst editors, amongst agents, possibly most of all, about the sort of state of the industry and the state of author care within the industry. What seems to be the kind of general consensus is that publishers have really cut back staffing wise, and they're not filling vacancies, and they're certainly not filling vacancies quickly, either on the editorial side or on the sales and marketing side, which is meaning that more and more books with more and more jobs associated with them are ending up on the pile of one individual. So more and more editors are finding that they're not just responsible for a book editorially, but they're also responsible for putting together the marketing plan, putting together publicity plans, all of the interaction with the author, and that there are more and more books on their lists, and that there is no more budget associated with marketing and promotion and all of those things. So editors and the publicists and marketing and sales staff who are still within publishers are just run absolutely ragged, to the point where people are leaving the industry, or people are taking long-term sick leave because of stress, anxiety, and impact on their own mental health, and those people aren't being replaced, those vacancies aren't being filled. And that obviously has a knock-on effect to the amount of communication that happens for authors, and everything sort of feels very, very precarious, as if a lot of the time it feels like you're only kind of one mistake or one person forgetting something away from really important things about the production of the book not happening. Now, I have to say, I have to asterisk this with, this isn't my experience with my current publisher, who are really communicative and very collaborative to work with. But I'm not a new author, I'm not a debut. This is my fourth publisher that I've worked with over the last 10 years. And with no shade on any of the previous ones, there were positives, pros and cons throughout. But the experience I'm having at the moment of having a commissioning editor and a developmental editor, both of whom respond really promptly and quickly to queries. Also an allocated publicist for the book, who again responds very quickly to emails, is very open to questions, very open to conversations. Those experiences feel a little bit unusual. It's not really necessarily what I have come to expect from publishing. So the issues that debut authors are reporting, I think, are heightened for them because you go into your debut with such big dreams and such high hopes, and you work so hard to get across that bar of signing your first contract and becoming a published author. So many of your hopes are pinned on that, that when there are disappointments, those disappointments are obviously then magnified. For more experienced authors who've been around the block a few times, it's not that those disappointments aren't there. It's not that we feel necessarily super positive about the publishing industry and the way things are working at the moment. It's more, I think, that we kind of get a bit jaded, and we get a bit to the point where we sort of roll our eyes and go, yeah, well, that's just how it goes, isn't it? In a way that isn't necessarily great. We should be expecting more from our publishers than we're sometimes getting at the moment. Again, with the asterisks, my current publisher, fortunately, is very communicative and very collaborative. But a lot of publishers aren't, and it's not necessarily through a lack of want. It's very often through a lack of time and a lack of resources to enable them to be. There have been a couple of articles in the bookseller here in the UK over the last couple of days, sort of in response to this, one by an agent, one by an editor. And the article by the agent in particular focused on author care and the elements of sort of author care that agents are kind of having to step into the breach on because editors and publishers don't necessarily have the time or the bandwidth to do those things anymore. And one of the things that struck me is, what do we mean by author care? Because I think sometimes this is where agents and editors have a slightly different understanding to authors ourselves. Now, I can only speak for myself, but as an author, what I consider good author care is being kept in the loop. I like to have all the information. I like to know how a book is selling. I like to know what the marketing plan is. I like to know what retailers it's been pitched to. If they said no, I want to know. I like to know why. I like to see the cover designs that a publisher rejected. I like to understand the thought process if we're changing a title. I like to understand the thought process behind the blurb, the copy that goes on the back of the paperback and that goes up on selling sites for the ebook. I like to have all of the information about all of those processes. I consider that part of author care, keeping your author in the loop, making sure that the process to publish the book is a collaborative process. Because if your author understands what's happening and why, they're in a much better position to support those processes, to support what marketing are doing through their own connections and their own social media and all of those things. They're in a much better position to promote the book from the same angle so that they're in tune with the publisher if they understand the reasoning behind the cover, the blurb, the title, the book packaging. So you're all kind of singing from the same page. So I consider that a part of author care, but also just good business sense to get everybody on the same page, that we're sharing information, that we understand what's happening and why. So communication is the absolute bedrock of author care. And then the second part of that, and this is a bit more difficult because obviously different authors are going to have different expectations and different kind of lines in the sand about what they do and don't want to do and what they do and don't want to change about their book. But I think a positive publishing process with a traditional publisher is a collaborative publishing process. It's a process where nobody gets to the point where they have to go, no, I'm vetoing this. This is a line in the sand. We are not changing this. It's a process where all the conversations are saying, I'd rather not change this because X, Y, and Z. And then the other person has the space to kind of come back and go, okay, I understand that. the flip side is this, and you reach a collaborative decision, which is hopefully a better decision than either you or the editor or the publicist or whoever it is that you're talking to would have reached on their own. So communication and collaboration are what I'm looking for to feel, as I do with my current publisher very happily, like an author who is being well cared for. What I don't really care about is being sent flowers on publication day. Being sent things, you know, publishers do some really sweet things like cakes and cupcakes and things to celebrate publication or a certain number of sales. All of that is delightful and lovely, but I'd rather you gave me information about how the book's doing and what your plans for it are. It's a working relationship. It's a professional relationship. The flowers, the cards, the cakes, all of that stuff is delightful. It's sweet, but it's a cherry on top of the icing on the cake. I'd rather have just really good cake with no cherry on top. So I'd rather have the good working relationship, the communicative working relationship, than the sprinkles. And all of those nice, pretty things, the flowers on publication day, etc., are sprinkles. They're not necessary. They're not actually what I mean when I talk about feeling respected, feeling cared for, feeling valued as an author within the publishing process. What I'm talking about is communication and collaboration and making sure that I have all the information as well so that I can be part of the collaborative process of bringing the book out. And that's what I think some editors at the moment are really struggling to find time to do. Every decision is made in a hurry and there isn't that time and space to relay the decision and the process behind it to the author or to their agent, or both ideally, and give them time to kind of say, okay, that's great, can we also, or okay, I understand that, but if possible, could we? To have that collaboration, and that collaboration and communication is what makes an author feel valued and respected, not the sprinkles on top of the cake. So there you go. There's some off-the-cuff thoughts on author care. It was a bit of a stream of consciousness. These things have been sort of playing in my mind. Normally when I do a video like this, I make some notes about what I'm going to say. Today I didn't, so goodness knows what I said. I hope I didn't libel anybody. All the editors I know individually are delightful. And I think that is generally true. Most people who go into publishing love books and want to work with authors. Obviously there are some people who are dicks, but there are some people who are dicks in any industry. Publishing isn't special in that. But the vast majority of editors are lovely and well-intentioned and work hard. But if they're squeezed so tight, there's only so hard you can work before you burn out. And at the moment, it feels like publisher burnout is kind of contributing to author burnout. And we're in a bit of a cycle where authors are struggling with being in this kind of fog of lack of communication and not knowing what's going on. And publishers and editors are struggling in this overwhelm of decision making and processes and so many books and so many authors and trying to keep on top of it all. And it feels like one kind of set of burnout is kind of feeding into the other. Yeah, I really hope there's a way through it. I'm a big fan of traditional publishing. When it works well, I think having that collaborative team around a book can be hugely valuable. But a lot of the time, realistically at the moment, it doesn't work well. So I did promise you that at the end of this video we would do a couple of very quick book reviews. So 2 books that I've read in the last month. I've read more than 2 books in the last month, but these were 2 that I really enjoyed. There was a couple that didn't quite hit for me, and I tend not to do reviews of books that I didn't enjoy, partly because as an author I understand that it takes just as much work to write a not great book as it takes to write a great book a lot of the time. And just because a book works for me doesn't mean it won't work for somebody else. And I respect the time and the effort the author has put in. So if I didn't love a book, I tend to just not mention it. But here are 2 that I did really enjoy. First up, Marian Keyes, again Rachel. Marian Keyes is just the queen. She is brilliant. She's a thing of wonder. Again Rachel is a sort of 25 years later sequel to one of her very early books, Rachel's Holiday. And Rachel's Holiday is an absolutely definitive book in the kind of commercial women's fiction genre, commercial fiction genre. I hate the term commercial women's, but anyway, within this kind of commercial family fiction, female empowerment fiction, relationship fiction, within that space in the market, Rachel's Holiday, which came out in the 90s, is an absolutely definitive book. It's warm and it's funny, and the main character is deeply flawed, and it deals with really big issues around addiction particularly, and it's just a masterclass in how you deal with a massive, serious, deep issue like addiction, but with warmth and with humour and with a real lightness of touch in the writing. It's one of the books that made me want to be a writer. Again, Rachel is a sequel to that. And I was quite nervous of reading this book. I didn't buy it when it came out in hardback because I was kind of just anxious that it was going to somehow break Rachel's Holiday, which is still one of my favourite books, and it's a book I reread relatively often. And so I kind of held off a bit. And then it came out in paperback more recently, and I was like, right, no, I'm going to read this book. I want to read this book. And it's wonderful. I sort of didn't know where she was going to take the story next. I sort of didn't know how she was going to tell this story without repeating ground from Rachel's Holiday. And in a lot of ways, it does repeat some of the ground from Rachel's Holiday. There is some of the same ideas in here, but Marian Keyes is such an exceptional writer that you don't feel like, oh, we've been here before, oh, we're just retreading the same characterisation and the same ground. It feels fresh and it feels new and it feels different, and we're meeting a character at a fundamentally different stage in her life. So she's changed a lot, but she's still absolutely recognisably the same Rachel. I absolutely loved this. I don't think you have to have read Rachel's Holiday to read this, but I would recommend reading them both, so you might as well. And it's gone straight in next to Rachel's Holiday as one of my absolute favourite books. So clever, so brilliantly done. Marian Keyes, again Rachel, 5 stars, love, 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 love. The other book that I've enjoyed this month is Katie Ford, One Enchanted Evening. Earlier in the year, possibly in January, maybe even at the end of last year, I talked about the previous book in this little series from Katie, which was called A Wedding in France. And this is the third book she's written that's set in the 1960s, and it's set around a group of friends who meet on a cookery course for elegant young ladies in Pimlico. And this is the third friend in the group, Meg. This is her story. And I just love these books. They're just a big warm hug of a story. If you're feeling a bit down, if you're feeling a bit delicate, which I was over the weekend. I was horribly premenstrual, and this book's just like, it's the book equivalent of a hot chocolate with marshmallows in it. It's just a big warm hug of a book. So I really enjoyed this. It was exactly what I needed emotionally when I was feeling a little bit delicate and a little bit sorry for myself. Katie Ford, One Enchanted Evening. It's just gorgeous. It's just so lovely and warm-hearted and charming, and yeah, exactly what you need. If you're feeling a little delicate, if you're feeling a little emotionally under the weather, I can't recommend Katie Ford, particularly this 1960s set series, highly enough. Do check it out. So that's today's video. I would love to hear your book recommendations. I'm in a bit of I don't know what to read next phase at the moment, so if you have any book recommendations for me, do pop them in the comments below. Do also let me know your thoughts on author care in publishing. It's such a big topic, and different authors obviously want slightly different things. We are not one homogenous mass, so do let me know what your thoughts are on the current state of traditional publishing and author care within the industry. And I will see you next Friday for a brand new video. And if you want to have that video shown to you by YouTube, do subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications, and I will see you next week.